So as the silver price moves higher, that makes the degree of leverage that much greater, and it goes up exponentially, not linear. So as companies begin to, as the silver price moves higher, that makes margins grow exponentially. And so we're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of stocks, frankly, really respond to that once the silver price gets moving.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and today is part 2 of my interview with Jeff Clark. In part 1, he talked about some of the underlying fundamentals driving the gold and silver markets, and now he's going to get into the mining stocks, some of the ones that he looks at, and some things to consider. So I think you'll enjoy this, and here we go. Jeff, now your comments on the mining sector and how things are looking for some of these miners. A little bit easier than past years with the prices a bit higher, and in the last couple of days we've seen a continuation of that rally. And how does that affect some of these companies that are going out and digging for the metals?
Well, as the question you gave me to ask Keith Neumeyer of First Majestic up in Vancouver last month, the issue is margin, right? So as the silver price moves higher, that makes the degree of leverage that much greater, and it goes up exponentially, not linear. So as companies begin to, as the silver price moves higher, that makes margins grow exponentially. And so we're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of stocks, frankly, really respond to that once the silver price gets moving. Once you see it above 20 and stay above 20, that's going to make a lot of these companies more profitable, and it'll make some that are unprofitable now profitable. And those will be good plays too. One example there would be Impact Silver. Impact Silver got a lot of attention at the Vancouver conference last month, and I think that's one reason they're poised for not just some growth, but they have a high degree of leverage to the silver price itself. And once silver is over 20, they're going to be 20, 25, I forget their exact all-in sustaining cost, what it is. But once they go from unprofitable to profitable, that's going to be another thing that's going to attract them to investors. That's going to pop their stock up on the screens of a lot of these Wall Street guys. So that's just one example of a stock that can do well as the price moves up, because again, earnings will grow exponentially simply because of a strong move in the silver price.
Yeah, and that's right. Impact Silver was on Arcadia Economics, so we'll take the credit. Hopefully we let some folks know. And again, you actually had one of the questions that I asked them about their cash burn rate, which I think it was nice to get your insight and present that question so people could actually hear their answer and understand the different dynamics that go into this. Obviously, the whole mining industry, it's kind of like speaking a different language. So I appreciate that there are folks out there like you that have experience and share your research. Along the lines of what you mentioned, though, about how things change, should we have silver above $20? You mentioned also in one of our emails that you talk to a lot of fund managers. Are a lot of the institutional managers still saying, well, let's wait a little bit, not quite yet? And still, I get the feeling a lot of them are still waiting to jump in. I saw someone mention that once the rally continues and other people are doing it, then it's easier for them to do it so they don't get blamed if it goes bad. Is that along the lines of what you're hearing?
They really are trend followers. Yeah, they're sniffing around the stocks, the mining stocks, I think, and some are taking positions. We haven't seen a big influx of investment from them. We've seen some, and that's partly why some of these stocks are starting to rise. But the one thing I would say is, I've been to a lot of these conferences, right? And as an analyst, you get invited to go to dinner with some of these companies, and there's always these other hedge fund managers that are there. And I've talked to a lot of them. And what I enjoy is seeing them get a glass or two or three of wine in them, and they tend to open up and be a little more forthcoming. And then you find out how they really feel, right?
Yeah.
So I do a lot of listening. I don't do a lot of talking at these
Yes.
dinners and events and things like that. I like to do a lot of listening and see, what they're really thinking. And Chris, these guys are no different than anybody else. They're human, and they manage a lot of money. That's the main difference between them and us. But they acknowledge that we're not crazy to own gold, because they don't see how this is going to go forever either. They know the Fed is boxed in. They're not stupid. These are very bright people. Okay, they're smart, but their whole idea is that, well, you gotta dance while the music's playing. I can't tell you how many times I heard that or something like that, meaning they have to invest. They have to keep buying Apple. They have to keep buying Tesla or whatever the case may be, because the music's playing. The stock market's going up. The Fed's got easy money. They're going to support it. We're going to keep buying. But they all think, and I mean every single one of them, thinks they're going to get out at ahead of everybody else. Or as soon as that music stops, they're going to jump out. They all think that. And these guys handle millions and billions of dollars, okay? So what's going to happen when the music does stop? Whenever that is, however that occurs, they're all going to want to jump out at the same time, right? So what's going to happen is, I think a crash in the stock market is likely to be bigger than it has to be, because they're all dancing while the music's playing, and they're all going to want to get out. They're all going to rush to the exit door at the same time, and the exit door can only accommodate one at a time. And then compound that with the fact that you have algorithms kicking in, and this could get ugly. So and by the way, that could affect gold and silver prices too. So if you have a huge dramatic waterfall sell-off that's an overnight thing, like in October 2008, well, yeah, that could temporarily affect gold and silver. That's probably going to be the last train out type of thing for gold and silver. If we do see that, that would be a buying time. But it's just amazing to me that all these guys kind of think alike, and they all think they're going to head to the exit when that time comes, and it could get ugly. It really could.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense, where I often think about, if you ran a hedge fund just by polling 1,000 people, what does everybody love, and sell those blindly, what does everybody hate, and buy that, just because if nobody's in an asset, then by some nature, there's a chance it's going to be undervalued, especially then you add on everyone's waiting to get in once it's already moved, which, provides the fuel underneath a bigger move. So will be interesting to see. And you mentioned First Majestic before. I know that's been one of the stocks that you like. Again, not asking any legal financial advice, but just any of your research you'd like to share on First Majestic, perhaps any other miners that you're looking at, or have anything you'd like to pass along about.
Yeah, First Majestic was one of my top picks for to own at this time. And I love to speculate. I own a lot of gold and silver stocks, too many probably. And I don't own any producers. But I do own First Majestic, which of course is a producer. So why do I own that? Well, I own it because they've clearly demonstrated leverage in the past to the silver price. So the silver price moves up 10%, this stock moves up 20, 30, 40%. It has a leverage of 2 to 3 to 4 times. And at times it's outperformed silver by 5 times. So it's demonstrated this 3 times already just in the past decade or so. Pardon me. So this is a stock that we know has a lot of leverage. So when the silver price really starts to move, this stock is really going to fly, I believe. And one of the reasons is because they have a high degree of leverage to silver. They produce, I think it's around 78%. I don't have it in front of me, Chris, but most of their revenue comes from silver, more than almost any other silver company. Impact Silver is very high also. I think it's approaching like 90%, but they're very small. So it's unusual to have a company as big as First Majestic having that percentage of revenue come solely from silver. It's very, very high. So they have a high degree of leverage. And what I think is going to happen is a lot of institutional investors, when the gold and silver mining stocks all of a sudden pop up on their screens and they're going to see the silver price moving, they're going to go, hey, where can we get the most leverage to silver through an equity? And they'll look at the silver world and they'll see Pan American Silver, like silver's in the name. It looks great. And it is great. It's a great company, Ross Beatty run, lots of good things about it, right? But First Majestic Silver is leveraged to the silver price. Their percent of revenue that comes solely from silver is more than twice that of Pan American Silver. And so I don't think it's going to take a genius to figure out that these guys are going to say, hey, we can get more leverage to silver with First Majestic than we can with the Pan Americans of the world. They'll still buy Pan American Silver. Again, it's not a bad company. I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying, if you want leverage to silver itself, well, let's go with the leverage. And that would be with First Majestic Silver. So
yep.
One of the things that, on Twitter, some people have said, hey, you recommended First Majestic and the stock is down. Well, they did have some news out on, February 19th. It was a great quarter, but they took a non-cash impairment charge at La Encantada, one of their primary flagship mines. And so I think investors didn't like that. It shouldn't have been all that surprising to the market, but apparently it was, and the stock sold off. And operationally, the company is doing fine. Higher production, lower costs, recovery rates are going up. So the company is in a strong position. And since then, has actually released some really good news on, it was Santa Elena, which is another one of their flagship projects. It looks like they're going to extend the mine life there, and the grade is going to be richer from some recent drill results that they had. So they'll be fine. But my point is, this was a short-term blip, and the market's already over it because the stock has moved up since that day. And by the way, I logged on to Canadian Insider, and on that day of that bad press release when the stock sold off pretty hard, there were insiders at First Majestic buying the stock that day in the open market with their own money.
Yep.
That tells you what management thinks about their own stock, right? They're buying in the open market. They're not just getting more options given to them or something like that. They're buying in the open market. So that was a very strong signal to me of what they think about their company if they're taking some of their own cash in addition to whatever other options they may have, and they're actually going into the open market and buying the stock. So that's what they think,
yep,
of the stock in the future. So again, that was a short-term blip in my opinion. I am heavily long in First Majestic. I'm not worried about what it's going to do in the future. It will be a industry leader in the silver market when that time comes. So I'm staying very long on that stock.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. And perhaps one last thing you could comment on, which I don't hear people mention often, although I feel is worth pointing out. You can let me know if that's the case or not. Yet when you have a situation like that with First Majestic or with some of the other stocks, or when you're reading a mining stock newsletter, I find there's two different camps where there's some people are saying, all right, how can I make, let's say they're assuming, I don't know which way the bullion price is going to go. So with bullion prices here, we assume we stay there. Some people are looking to make money on stocks given that environment. So they're looking for a good deposit. And then there's other people like myself who fall in the camp where, hey, I just see gold and silver being a lot higher at some time. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this ore grade versus that deposit, and perhaps realizing that people may be coming from different perspectives and factoring that in can allow investors to take the information and use it to their own purpose more appropriately. That makes sense?
Yes, I think there will be a period of time where a rising tide lifts all boats, like the saying says. It's really true. A lot of these stocks will move up when that time comes, when the silver price really gets rocking and rolling. But there will be some that are going to do better. And there's a shift in the market with gold and especially silver. The leaders of 20 years ago in the last bull market won't be the leaders in the new bull market. And so the great thing about silver, Chris, is there's not that many of them. There's just not that many primary silver producers out there. Apple Computer could buy every share of every primary silver producer that produces over 1 million ounces a year with 13% of its cash. That's ridiculous. That the entire primary silver industry. Now, Apple's not going to do that. I'm just saying, look how small it is and how much money coming into that market could really make it explode. And so a lot of the silver companies, developers, explorers, producers, they're all going to move up together. But there will be some that are going to outperform. I think First Majestic will be one. I think Silvercrest Metals is going to be another one. They're going to be one of the leaders, and they're at least 2 years, I believe, away from production. Mag Silver is going to be another one. That's a huge, huge project, probably the largest silver project in the world. That's going to be another one. They should be in production by the end of the year. Alexco Resources, that's another good one I really like. Endeavor Silver, I talked earlier about First Majestic, their leverage to silver. Well, the company with the second highest percentage of revenue that comes solely from silver is actually Endeavor Silver down in Mexico. I like those guys. I've been down to that mine a couple times now, and they have the second highest one. Now, they had a couple problems with a couple mines. They're getting that straightened out, and production could as much as double over the next couple years. The stock has been depressed more than other silver companies, so that's a potentially good buy right now. And then the other one I like, and I do own all these, so full disclosure, I do own these, but I'm sharing what I think are the strongest picks of all these because I own a lot of others as well. And that would be Discovery Metals down in Mexico. They have a good project, and it's going to be in production here next year. So that's a one I've bought recently, actually. So those are some good picks. But again, the idea is I do think that a lot of these are going to rise together, but there will be some that will clearly outperform. And the great thing about silver is there's not that many of them. So it's a little easier to pick and choose which ones might do better and might be the target of investors than it would be if you were picking technology stocks where they're a dime a dozen. We don't have that in silver. We only have a handful of these guys. So I think picking the easier ones will be is a slightly simpler job than it would be otherwise. So it's going to be fun, Chris, when it finally happens.
Plus, fortunately, we have good folks like you who are already pretty familiar with the stocks. By all means, should anyone take anyone or any single analyst word as gospel? No, but I think, Jeff, you're a great starting point, and people can find you. You have great presentations on YouTube. The link to goldsilver.com, where people can buy physical gold or silver, is below, as well as where they can find your research, Jeff, which I am a subscriber to and love getting your columns. So appreciate you joining me here today, and it'll be a fun couple of years to see how it all unfolds going forward, and we'll look forward to checking back in with you again soon.
I don't think it's 10 years away. I think it's more like, within the next 1 to 5 year time frame, Chris, and I think you and I are going to be very happy by the end of that.
Well, I sure agree, and it'll be fun to follow along, my friend.
It sure will. Great. Well, thanks for having me, Chris.
So that was today's episode. Hope you enjoyed what you watched and heard. If so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell right there so you can stay posted as we bring new episodes and have another video coming your way that I think you'll find interesting.